Hey guys, and welcome to math. Today we're going to be talking about dot plots, being able to look at a number set and be able to display them. You should be able at this point in time to remember how to kind of set up the basics of any kind of graph or plot of information. We'll go over it, but by the end of today you should be able to do this. So let's get started. So what is a dot plot? Well, kind of like a histogram, it displays information, but specifically using dots based off a number line, depending on the numbers you have from a data set. Now, the question here says is that there's a data below of number of hours a group of students spent doing homework last week. We have 5, 4, 1, 6, 0, 5, 3, 3, 5, 6, 1, 3, 8, 5, and 4 minutes spent doing homework last week. Again, these are hours, not minutes. So keep that in mind. So what you're going to do is you're going to be drawing a dot plot to represent the data, and you're going to title your display. So the title of your graph should probably be something such as hours students spent doing homework, or hours of homework last week, something to that effect. What you're going to do next is then go ahead and draw that line. So I'm going to go ahead and get my handy dandy tool here and draw that line so you guys can have an idea of what to do. So I'm going to go ahead and draw mine about right here. I apologize that my line is not super straight. And what you're going to do is you're going to have a line here and a line here. All right, so you're going to start with the smallest number, and the number we have there is 0. So you're going to put 0 down here. The largest number you have is 8. So you're going to go ahead and put 8 over here on this side. All right, so go ahead and do that. Although I'm not going to do it, what you're going to do on your papers is you're going to numbers 1 through 7 in between. If it's easiest for you to make sure that's even, I really like making my stuff even. So I usually start and figure out what the highest number is and use it as a frame of reference, and then start at the smallest number and work my way up. That way my numbers are even, and that's just something I like to do for myself, but you do whatever you like to do. So step 2, the next thing you're going to do is you're going to now put the dots on the corresponding numbers. So what you're going to do is you're going to go down your numbers and put them where they're supposed to be. So when you have your numbers, you're going to put your dots, and you should have something like that. Okay, so for me, once you get all of your dots on there, you should be able to answer the rest of your questions. Apologies for my reminders to restart my computer. Okay, so what you're going to do, you're going to answer these questions. So number 2, how many students does your dot plot represent? Well, you need to explain your answer and know the number of students is correct. So if you look at your dot plot, you will see that you don't, you know you're correct because of the dots that are represented above that number, and you know that because of the data set you were given before. You should know that it's correct because how you can do that is just by crossing up the numbers as you go along. So for example, if I put 5, I cross off 5 and put 5 above 5. If I have a 4, cross off 4. That's how you can verify that they're correct. Obviously, these dots would be placed somewhere correctly, more accurate on your number line, but that's one way you can know they're correct. Question number 3, why are no dots shown at 2 and 7? Well, simply put, there is no data recorded that says that students studied for 2 or 7 hours. So therefore, no dots are needed. You should have something to that effect placed on for question number 3. Question number 4, why do you think 5 hours is the most frequent number of hours? Explain. Well, based off the number set, you could just say that's about average. That's something I would say. It's probably be about average. It's in the middle between 0 and 8 hours that people spend studying most frequently. And if you think about it too, if you really want to go in depth of how you think about this, there's 5 days a week. Each student spent an hour each night studying. That's just a simple way to look at it, and it's actually recommended. So something to think about even in your own study habits. So, all right, number 5, we're going to predict. So the data represented 15 students in all. Okay, would the skill of the dot change if it included more students? And explain your answer. Well, obviously, if we were together, I'd ask you this question, and the answer would be yeah, it would. The scale would change, especially if you have more students. It's possible it wouldn't, but more often than not, it would, especially with more information that you're when you're given more information, whether it's the number of students or the amount of hours they studied. Number 6, it says, suppose the data represented sixth grade students. How the data changed if it represented high school students, and explain. Well, again, this is kind of making a prediction and an inference. Well, if you look at high school students, they're older, they're studying for college, they have, high potential classes. These are all things to consider that would cause a high school student to study more. So they would probably be studying longer hours than a sixth grade student who is, learning these things for the first time, who's getting more homework, who has more classes in a day. The high school student would generally, yes, have more information. So the data would change if we were to change the representation of who we were looking at data from. So yeah, that's the answer to your first page. The next thing we're going to look at is Unit 8, Lesson 2, the puzzle penguin. So you have 2 puzzle penguins on this page. What you are asked to do is to kind of read the scenario and help the penguin basically figure out his mistake. You can go ahead and do this on your own. This is a perfect time to pause the video so you can answer these questions. And then we can move on to the next thing. All right, so as you can see, we kind of went a little bit backwards. We started with Unit 2 and now moving to Unit 1. The reason why we kind of did that is so we can kind of understand some stuff. What you learned previously in your other videos that you watched is taking some notes on numerical data. What is it? How does it help us? Why is it important? And how do we use it in some of the other things we've been doing? Well, like the description says here, numerical data involves numbers and quantities, okay? An example of numerical data is the number of students in our class. Now, if you compare the students we have in our class compared to maybe in your science classes you have with, Miss Leonard or Miss Crock or whoever your teacher is, you may understand that there's a complete difference of people, the amount of people in there, so your data would be different. We also know that the number of students are different in comparison to the school, right? A lot of our classes are about 25 kids average in a class, and compared to our school body, and then compared to our city, compared to our state. If we were to compare our school to maybe a school in Centerville, well, Centerville is a smaller district. Centerville has a smaller amount of kids. Even if you were to look maybe up in Brainerd, their school's probably a lot smaller. So comparing in the cities, and even if you compared it from state to state, South Dakota, for example, they have a lot of small towns spread out throughout the state. It's a farming town. So they have a lot of smaller schools, maybe comparison to Minnesota, who has a lot of bigger cities. So it's just something to keep in mind. Our numerical data involves our numbers and quantities, and it can vary from just little bits of information, and it changes from adding little bits of information, kind of like what we talked about before, from middle schoolers to high schoolers, and the amount of hours they spend studying. So for each group below, again, I know you've already done this, so please again. For each student in your school, we're going to kind of create this together. So number 1 is kind of done for you. The length of time it takes each student to travel to school in the morning. These times will vary because students live at different distances from school. Some people live 10 minutes, 5 minutes, 20 minutes. It varies from person to person and depending on where you live in the district. For each student in your class, I want you to kind of come up with a data set of how you would be able to collect information from students in your class. Number 3, for each 6th grade student in your state, I want you to come up with a question of how you'd find the information specifically to them. For each teacher in your school, so here at Skyview, how would you find numerical data for the teachers in your school? What is a valid thing? And then go ahead and write your own example. It can be anything and everything. Just make sure that it's measurable, making sure that you're using a comparison, and trying to find a specific amount of data. Utilize the thing you learned from before from the dot plot to help you with this. and also use it to help kind of figure out how you're going to answer these questions. This is also part of your assignment, okay? All right, one of the last few pieces here, comparing numerical data. If you haven't had time to pause your video right now, would be a good time to do so you can finish the assignment ahead of you so you're on track, unless you feel more comfortable going ahead and moving on. But that is going to make it more difficult for you to keep up, so just keep that in mind. The comparison of numerical data, what you have here is a group of 6th grade students that took a fitness class. They took a test at the beginning of the school year, and then they did crunches and completed within 1 minute, okay? Again, crunches, in case you don't know, they're also called sit-ups. So if you're confused with what a crunch is, it's a sit-up. In the picture there, she's kind of demonstrating what that would look like. All right, so what you have here is the start of the year and the end of the year. And you have a total of 7 students that have gone ahead and done crunches. And they compared the results from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. So for example, we have Lucas, who did 32, and then we have Lucas had 38 at the end of the year. So using the tables above, all right, you're going to consider this question. Was this group better at crunches at the beginning of the year or the end of the year? And why is this question difficult to answer? So I'm not going to tell you this because I want to hear your guys' ideas and thoughts on this, on why this is difficult to answer. The reason being is it's meant to be difficult to answer, and we'll get to that why later on. Number 7, why are there different ways you could display the 2 sets of data so the sets could be easier to compare? Well, this is also a difficult question to answer in some ways, only because it's difficult to explain these things, well, one, when we're in an online forum. However, when we're going to do this, we're going to need to learn how to display this information. So how is it easier, and what would make it easier to compare it? Well, if we did a histogram, or if we did some form of displaying the information, it would allow us to see a comparison of data from the beginning to the end of the year. A histogram would allow us to see a set of data for the group of students, and then be able to utilize it from, did they have more crunches at the beginning of the year, or did they have more crunches at the end of the year? It's kind of a way to show if they kind of become more fit. It's kind of like if you go to the gym and continue to practice lifting weights, will your body become more accustomed to it, or will it have more problems? Or can you not lift the same anymore? But if you keep practicing at it, more likely than not, your numbers will increase. So, last question here we have is, choose one of the ways named in exercise 7. Why would that make a data easier to compare? So basically what it's asking you here is for you to understand, you can go ahead and actually cross that one off. You don't need to answer the question of number 8. So don't worry about 8, just go ahead and cross that one off. All right, the last ones here is these 2 pages, and then we'll move on to the next thing. So again, it's crunch data for a different group of students, so it's not the same as the one you saw before. Like we mentioned before, the dot plot displays the frequency of number data. It uses dots to show how often numbers occur. So basically what you see in front of you is a number line, and then it also shows the frequency and how many dots there are for that number, so how often a number occurs. As you can see, 36 here has the most dots. 31, 37, 39, 41, and 42 have the least amount of dots. They only have 1. So when looking at number 9, the data table shows how many crunches various students completed. The number of the students is shown on the table is the same as the number of the dots on the plot. Is it the same? So you should be able to answer yes or no, and why. How does the dot plot represent the data in the tables? Well, essentially, the dots represent the number of crunches, okay? So you're displaying it out on a line so you can see the frequency. For example, how often a number occurs, which is 36. Number 11 in the dot plot, there's 3 dots above 36, okay? Which three students do the dots represent, and explain how you know? Well, and basically how you know is basically looking at the number of dots and comparing it to the tables and see who had which. And that's going to allow you to be able to determine who had what. All right, so analyzing your dot plots. Okay, so how many students does the dot plot represent, and explain how you know? This is going to be your homework. Okay, so numbers 12, 13, 14 is going to be your homework for tonight. Describe the dot plot and explain how it's used to display numerical data. You should be able to describe this. We just talked about it, so there shouldn't be a reason why you can't answer it. But make sure you're able to answer these questions for your homework. Make sure you upload your assignment if you haven't done so already, so that you can get credit for today's lesson, as well as get credit for your homework. Remember that you need to turn it in on time in order to receive full credit. If you have any questions, please send me an email or ask me on the forum, and I can help you from there. Thanks, and have a good day.